Okay, welcome everyone. As we learn our marathon Matzah Shabbos, dedicated by A.B. Spry for the safety of the soldiers, and for Issa Zeb ben Yuta by Shimon Klein, Iloi Nishmas Asheranch ben Yehuda, Gitba Shimon Pinchas, Irving Fishbaum for his Gesundheit ben Rezel. We learned from my Shver, Avig Deraye ben Rivka, they should have a refuah shalema b'seich shachar Yisrael. We welcome in Stephen Holtzman, Irving Fishbaum, Saba. We welcome in Mark Frankel. It's good to have you back, Mark. Menachem Umansky, Aaron Swade, Yitzi Fuchs, A.B. Spry, Bruce Eisenberg, Eddie Chazan, Mordechai Sultan, Michal, Nachman Chapler, Yitzi Muller, Rich Leonard. It's good to have you, Rich. If we can't have you in person, it's good to have you from your command center. Shimon Klein, Moshe Lehman, Moshe Jackman, Yehudi from Yerushalayim, Chaim Braun, Shelley Zeitlin. Here in Shul, we have the pleasure of having Barish Kesselman, Reb Avram, and Ruvain Shanit. And we welcome in David Helfgott on Kol HaLashon. We are holding by Bishloima, which is 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis. 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis. Bishloima, remember we were dealing with 2 different fields. The case where I gave Mark a deposit and he claims it was stolen and it was really by him. So that's the case of Toyin Tainus Ganav. And where Eddie stole it himself. That's the case of a Ganav. So Bishloima Lamanda Omer Travayu B'Toyin Tainus Ganav. Excuse me, Bishloima Lamanda Omer Chad B'Goynev V'Chad B'Toyin Tainus Ganav. That the 2 psukim that we were dealing at, one is talking about where Eddie steals it himself, that he pays kefil. And one is talking about where I gave Mark a deposit and he claims it was stolen and then we found it by him. So, Shopper, that's how we know that the thief himself also pays kefil. But according to Mandiyama, the Travayu B'Toyin Tainus Ganav, that we needed both psukim to talk about Toyin Tainus Ganav, where Mark I gave it to him as a deposit, and he claimed that it was stolen, and we said that one was coming to stay, that where he claimed that it was stolen, then we found it by him, he pays kefil, but where he claimed that it was lost, and then we found it by him, he doesn't pay kefil. So, Ganav Atzmai Minole, how do we know that a regular thief has to pay kefil? So you'll say, what do you mean, Rabbi Weiss? Well, it's a Kal V'Chaimer. If in the case where I give it to Mark as a deposit, so it came to his hand beheter in a permissible way, and he simply claimed it was stolen, and we find it by him, he has to pay kefil, then where Eddie steals it outright, surely he should pay kefil. But if that's the case, remember we said that Mark, where he claims it was stolen, he only pays kefil if he swears. And if we're learning a Ganav from that, then Dayo Lovim in Adin Liyos Kanani, would it be enough that it should be like the origin? Malahalim B'Shvua, Mark only pays kefil if he swears when he claims it was stolen. So then Afkan B'Shvua, then Eddie would only have to pay kefil if he accompanied it with a shvua, but that's not the din. A thief pays kefil just because he stole it. Says the Gemara, well, Nafkalei Midatana de Bechiske. Now, people that are familiar with psukim say, I don't understand. What's the whole question? There's a beferish pasuk in the Torah that says that when you steal, you pay kefil. The pasuk says, "Ki yignov ish sharoiseh." When Eddie steals an ox or a sheep, imimatzi tzimatzi biyada agneva. If we find by him the theft, misharad chamorat sech chaim shnayim mishalim. He has to pay twice kefil. So I mean, what's the whole question? It's a beferish pasuk in the Torah. As we welcome in Ben Zion Cohn, who just joined us for our 24th Zoomer of the evening, and Dr. Guy, and Yitzi Muller. Now we have Mo Kushner joining us as well. Sandy Grunfeld has came in, and as well as Ezra Baraka has joined us. Welcome, everyone. And it's good to start off this week with, yes, and Reb Blumenfeld has come in, thank you. As we start off the new week already with 25 wonderful Zoomers. What's the whole question? It's a Beferish Pasuk. However, as Rashi explains, Rashi is bothered by this, and Rashi says that pasuk only talks about live things. Shor, chamor, seh, chayim, shnayim, yeshalim. How do we know when you steal? Because Eddie likes to steal things like Electrolux, vacuum cleaners, because he's traveling a lot. So, he has to steal in order to make it possible, so blenders and snow blowers, that's the kind of stuff that Eddie steals, right? So how do you know that? So the Gemara says, well, Nafkale, as we welcome in Rabbi Kranz, 3 lines from the bottom of Samach Gimel Amud Beis, Nafkale midetana de Beichizkiah. We learn it out from the Tana de Beichizkiah. The Tana de Beichizkiah, Yomer Shor Ugeneva, let the pasuk of Ki Yignavi Shor say Mamatzi Samatzi Biyadai Hageneva Mishar Ad Chamar Ad Tzev Chaim Shnayim Mishalim. Let it just say Geneva and Shor, and we would know everything. Vakol Bechlal. So the Gemara says Ilu Kach Hayisi Aimer Ma Prat, because we'll see that we're going to dash in this pasuk as a klal prat or klal. Ma prat mafurish karv legabi mizbeach, only a shor which could be offered on the mizbeach. Av kol karv legabi mizbeach. So ma yesh lach lehavi. With that, you would include also a sheep, because the sheep could be brought on the mizbeach too. Kishu aimer seh, when it says besides shor, it says seh. What do I need it to say seh for? Hari seh Emma. We learned out seh already from the shor. Hamani Mekayim Geneva, because Geneva makes it a klal, a product klal. So if we already learned out seh from shor because it's kain prat, so what do we do with seh? L'rabba is called over. So the Gemara says, well then, if it includes everything, Yom seh u'geneva v'akol b'chlal, shouldn't we be able to include everything? So the Gemara says, no. Ilu kacha yisi omer ma prat mefurish davar hakadosh b'bechayra. Only things that have kedushas bechar, because these are animals that their firstborn is holy. But a tamidika animal whose firstborn is holy, maybe you don't pay kefil. Av kol davar hakadosh b'bechayra. So ma yesh lach lavi. What would you include if it says shor and seh and geneva, which is the klal product klal? What would you include? You would include also a donkey, because a donkey is also kadosh b'bechayra. Chamar. But then the Torah says donkey. Kishuaymer chamar, hari chamar emma. We already derived chamar from the klal of prado klal. Homani mekayim geneva. So what do we learn extra now from this klal of prado klal, which now teaches us an extra word chamar? L'rabba is called over. So the Gemara says, Yomer shor b'chamar seh u'geneva v'achol b'chlal. We should include it and everything. Ilu kach hayis yom ma prat mefurish balei chayim, all live things, because shor seh and chamar embrace all live things. That's a common denominator. Af kol balei chayim. So ma yesh lach lahavi. What would you include? Shar balei chayim, other living things. Then, but it also says chayim shnayim yishlalim. Kishu aimer chayim hari chayim emma. We already inferred live things. Hamani mekayim geneva. What do we learn out from the klal of product klal, which is geneva, and it says shor seh chamor and chayim? What else are we going to include? L'rabba is called over, even inanimate objects. So now, the question is that we're saying that geneva is a klal product klal, and it says let it say shor and geneva. That's the lashon of the Gemara. The Gemara says Amar Mar. Amar Mar is a an analysis. Amar Mar, Mani Mekayim Geneva l'Rabba is called over. Amar Mar, Ye'omer Sharu Geneva. Let it say Shar and Geneva, but it doesn't say Shar and Geneva. It says the other way. It says Geneva and Shar. It says Ki Yignavi Shar. It says Mimatzei Tzimatzei Biyodai HaGeneva Mishar Ad Chamor. So it says Geneva before Shar and not after Shar. Miksiv Shar Geneva, Geneva v'Shar D'chsiv. V'chitei ilu nemar kamer, if it would say Shar Geneva. So the Gemara says, ilu nemar Shar Geneva, if it would say Shar Geneva, what would that be? That would be a prat uklal. Now the din in the 13 principles of Rabbi Yishmael is prat uklal ein would we be able to say that just like the prat is something that's on the mizbeach? So anything on the mizbeach have a shar prat u'geneva klal. The shar would be a prat and geneva would be klal. Prat u'klal. If you have a prat and klal, then we say nasa klal moisef ala prat. The generalization adds to the prat and adds everything. Visrabalu kol milit. And obviously, then we wouldn't need anything else. We wouldn't need chamor, we wouldn't need seh, we wouldn't need chayim. Ella kedisiv kamre. Geneva v'shar. It says first Geneva and then shar. So the Gemara says, well, then that's only a klal of prat. And if it's a klal followed by a prat, ein b'chlal ela mashe b'frat. Would you be able to say everything is included? Or just like the shar is something that's on the mizbeach, so everything else that's on the mizbeach? No, if it's a klal of prat, have a geneva klal, v'shar prat, and another rule of Rabbi Yishmael is klal of prat, a generalization followed by a specification. Ein b'chlal el mashe b'prat. There's in the generation only shar in midi achrin aloi. Says Gemara, no. You have to understand, Geneva is the first klal, and Chayim is the second klal. So the pasuk says, "Imimatzei simatzei b'yada Geneva mishar ad chamor ad sech Chayim shnayim yishalem." So Geneva is the first klal, and Chayim is the second klal. Amar Rav Tana Chayim kasamakle. The second klal of the sandwich is Chayim. Uklal prat uklal karmale. So the Gemara says, but the second klal is not similar to the first klal. The first klal, Geneva, embraces anything that's stolen. Chayim is only living things. Well, like dami klal abrasra l'klal kama. The latter klal is not similar to the former klal. Says, well, that's okay. Rabbi Yishmael, that's the academy of Rabbi Yishmael. The kahai gavna dorshe klali prate, that you could do a klal product klal even when the two generalizations are not similar. V'achi kakashale im himatze tzimatze lamali. Why does it have to say? Because remember, the pasuk starts out with im himatze tzimatze. The lashon of pasuk is ki yign revi shoraisa im himatze tzimatze v'yada gneva. So why does it have to say im himatze tzimatze? Yomi shnor gneva v'chayim v'akol b'chlal. Ilu kain, if so, hayisi yomer ma prat mafurish davar akarv l'gabi mizbeach, something that's offered on the mizbeach. Afkol hakarv l'gabi mizbeach. Ma yesh loch lahavi. What are you going to include? Seh. A sheep, because that's also kishuayim seh, so now that's superfluous. Hari seh emar ha'mani mekayim geneva. What do we learn out from geneva? L'rabba is called over. So the Gemara says, but still, yamer geneva. In other words, when it says geneva, it means from the klal of product klal, a klal product klal, which is sandwiched with geneva and chayim. What do we learn out from the extra seh? So we learn out everything. So the Gemara says, well, Yomer Geneva v'shar v'seh v'chayim v'akol b'chlal. But then we would say, Ilu kein ha'yisi yomer ma prat mefurish davar hakadosh b'b'chayra, only that which has kedushas b'char, because seh and shar the firstborn is holy. Af kol davar hakadosh b'chayra. Ma yesh lach lahavi. What would you include chamor? But then it says chamor because chamor of the bechor is also holy. Kishavayim chamor hari chamer ema. We already inferred chamor. So hamani mekayim geneva. What do I learn out from the klal, the product klal, to include the rabbis kol davar? So the Gemara says Yomi geneva v'shavas ever chamor v'chayim v'kol b'chlal. Everything is included. Oh no. Ilu keino yisi yomer ma prat mafurish balei chayim, only living things. Af kol balei chayim. Ma yashloch lehavi shar balei chayim. You would include other living things. So then, why does it have to say chayim? Kishu yomer chayim hari chayim emar. Ha mani mekayim geneva. What do I do from the klal product klal of geneva and chayim? L'rabba is called over to include everything. So then, if we include even inanimate objects, then im himatzei tzimatzei biyadei agneva lamali. Why does it say im himatzei tzimatzei? So says the Gemara, as we welcome in Pesach Siegelman and Dr. Block hitting 30 Zoomers tonight. And we're missing Marshall Castle. Marshall saw that Mark was away so long, he got jealous. So he went away also. That's the problem, Mark. But anyway... no, Marshall's not been feeling so well the past week, off and on. Should have a refuah shalema. So now, what the Gemara does now, as we turn the page to Daf Samach Daled, remember Samach Daled is a sweet daf because it's soda. Samach Daled is soda. Yeah, it's soda. That's it reminds me of a good old Pepsi with ice that Irving used to bring me. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Ihochi shaper kashale. It's a good question. What do we do with the imimatei simatei? The problem is, you want to include from this klal or product klal even things that are not alive because it didn't have to say chayim. But chayim is one of the generalizations. You can't be marba more than the generalization. Mishum dislay pircha l'rabis kol davar meicha kamaislay miklala basra from the second generalization of chayim, but klala gufei chayim ksibe. You can't add more than the generalization itself. The generalization itself is a living thing. So klala product klal might come anyway. How could it help? Ila sir kol davar. If it's coming to include everything, even a wallet, ha'chayim ksiv, bali chayim in, it's only living things, midi achrin alai. That's why we need the im himatzei timatzei. The im himatzei timatzei superimposes over geneva and chayim, and it becomes the klal of product klal. It becomes, we're going to see that we could use a method of drasha that we could separate, since it says a double lashon imimatzei timatzei. We could, if you find, we put on one side and the timatzei on the other side, and that becomes the two klalim. And that's what the Gemara says. Misham hachi itzrich im himatzei, says the Gemara, but wait a second. How does imimatzei timatzei become two klalim? Imre vashnei kilos desmicha adadininu. They're next to each other. They have to create a sandwich on either side of the shor chamor se and chaim. Ravina kidimre b'marava, like they explained in the west. That means in Eretz Yisrael, because Eretz Yisrael is to the west of Bavel. Kol mokum she'atamoitze shnei klolis hasmuchim zelazeh. When you find two generalizations next to each other, hotel prat beineim, you could put the specifications in between them, the dunan bichlal prat, and make a generalization specification. Shadi shar beini matzah limatzeh, we put shar in between the himatzeh and limatzeh lasuyeh mai. Ile asuye balichayim, if it's coming to include living animals, mechayim nafka, that we learn from chayim. El asuye davar she'ena balichayim. It's coming to include that which is not living. V'davar shachi, ma prat mafurish davar, ha-metaltal, that's movable. The gufa imam, and then its intrinsic value. Af kol davar metaltal v'gufa imam. V'su shadi chamor beini matzah l'samatzah l'asiyeh mai. Ilasiyeh davar she'ein b'elachayim, that we already learned from Mishar Nafka. Elasiyeh davar mesuyim. It has to be only something that has a siman. But in the event that a person found a lost article and he keeps it without a siman, he's not considered a thief, because without a siman he could keep it. Ihachi selamali. Then why does it have to say sheep? That's going to be a problem. What do we need seh? And what do we need chamor? So the Gemara says, chamor we use for davar mitzvah, but what do we need seh for? Ella says the Gemara, what really happens over here is that himatze timatze is even more than a klal. It's even more than a generalization. It's a ribui. It's an amplification, which is more inclusive than a generalization. Ela riba umiyat v'ribo. Kedetana debei Rabbi Yishmael, the Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael. Elsewhere in Shas, it says about fish that have fins and scales. So it says b'mayim beis b'amim. It says anything in the water, and it says it twice. Ein zeh klal uprat. It's not just this generalization specification. Ela riba amiyat. It's an amplification. V'riba amiyat riba amiyat v'riba riba akol. And over here also it says imimatze tzimatze. It's inclusive. My Rabbi kol mile. It says anything that you steal, you have to pay kefil. So if it includes anything, then why does it have to say, as we welcome in Richard Rosenzweig, Richard, if you come on Zoom, you'll be number 31. And that's a big thing, because that's the gematria of Kale, Aleph Lamed, which is a big thing. So you could bring the Almighty into the Zoom by coming on. Now, says the Gemara, if we include everything, so then why does it have to say Shor, Sech, Hamor, Chaim? Iachi kol hani prote lamali. So now we're switching tact. They come for specific exclusions. Chad lemute karka, shor, and not real estate. You don't pay kefil if you steal real estate. V'chad lemute avodim, you don't pay kefil if you steal slaves. V'chad lemute shtoros, and one comes to include notes. You don't pay kefil if you steal promissory notes. What do we do with Geneva and Chaim? So we took care of Shor, Seh, and Chamor. What do we do with Geneva and Chaim? Oh, that's a different drasha. Geneva v'Chaim l'kederav. And that means that if Eddie steals something and it gets emaciated, he has to pay the way it was when he stole it. That's what we learn out from Geneva v'Chaim l'kederav. The Amar Achya l'Keren, you have to give rebirth to the principle ke'ein sheganav, and you have to bring it back to the way it was when he stole it. So now the Gemara says, okay, the one that says that earlier in the case where I gave Mark a pikadon and he claims that it was stolen, and we had two psukim over there, and we used one for the thief and one for when he claims it was stolen, we find it by him, so that we don't need this pasuk of himatze tzimatze to tell me that a thief pays kefil. V'ganav atzma nafkele me im yamatze aganav, from the earlier pasuk of im yamatze aganav. So then, hi im himatze tzimatze my darish bey. What does he do with this whole pasuk? He already learned that a thief like Eddie pays kefil. The Amarava Bar Ilai, my time of the Rav, what's the reason that Rav holds? Kefil is a knas. So if Eddie admits to it, Barbach is going to be our 31st Umer. Welcome, Abe. The din is that if Eddie comes and confesses that he stole the vacuum cleaner, then he doesn't pay kefil, because Maida B'Knas, kefil is a knas, Maida B'Knas is potter. So now, says the Gemara, The Amar Rava Bar Ahilai, my time of the Rav, the Amar Moide Beknas V'Kak Bo Eidim. That even though if witnesses come that Eddie stole it after he admits it, Potter, maybe not, maybe we should say that even though he admitted it, if witnesses comes, maybe you should pay kefil. No. D'chsiv im himatzei timatzei. And that means im himatzei be'edim, if we found out about it because of witnesses, timatzei b'dayan. Then we could take the kefil in court. But if we found out about it first because Eddie fessed up, prat l'mashias atzmai. Says Gemara, according to Maniyama, the earlier psukim are both with Toin Tanis Ganav, and we need imi matzei timatzei to teach us the thief. How do we know that if Eddie incriminates himself, he doesn't pay kefil? That says that we know me asher yashion Elohim. Only if the judges declare him guilty. V'loya mashiach atzmai. Says Gemara, "L'man yom echad beganav echad b'toyin tanis ganav." The aisalei mihimatzei himatzei timatzei that we learn out from himatzei timatzei l'mashiach atzmai. For Eddie incriminates himself. Hay asher yashinun Elohim my darishlei. So he says there's two drushes. From asher yashinun Elohim, that the judge makes him guilty. That comes to tell me Moide B'Knas is Potter. But I might think that if he's Moide B'Knas and then witnesses come, then he would be Chayiv. Therefore it says, Im Himatzeh, only if we found out from Edom, then Timatzeh B'Dayanim. But if we found out from Eddie, then even if Edom come afterwards, he doesn't pay. So there's two drushes. Asher Yashin Elikim tells us only if the judges declare him guilty, but if he confesses, he's potter. But I might think that if he confesses and then witnesses come afterwards, maybe he has to pay. Then we have another pasuk of imimatzei timatzei. Umandiyama travayu b'toyin tanis ganav, and therefore imimatzei timatzei is not extra because that's where we learn out that a ganav pays kefil. He taka holds that if Eddie confesses and then witnesses come, Eddie has to pay case. Says the Gemara, now the Gemara is going to say, okay, you found one drasha to use with imimatzei timatzei. That imimatzei be'edim timatzei b'dayanim. But if Eddie confesses, then he doesn't have to pay. But what about all the rest of the pasuk? Shor, says, Salma, Chaim, Geneva. What do we do with the rest of the pasuk? So the Gemara says, that we already learned out Ganav from the earlier pasuk. The nafkele Ganav mehasam. Bishloime imi matzei timatzei, the first part of the pasuk, imi matzei timatzei, likid Rava Bar Ahilai. That we use for Rava Bar Ahilai, that the only time Eddie pays is imi matzei be'edim timatzei b'dayanim. But if we find out from him, even if witnesses come after, he doesn't pay kefil. Aval kanani prate lamali. What are we going to do with Shar, Chamor, Seh, Chaim, Geneva? So the Gemara gets out of it with an easy rule. Another rule by Rabbi Yishmael. Kedetana debei Rabbi Yishmael, the Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael. Kol parsha shenemra v'nishnas, any parsha that teaches something and is repeated. In other words, it's a review. It's repeated for one lesson that we learn from it. And once we learn one lesson, and that's Moide B'Knas V'Akach Bo Eidim, is Potter, then we don't have a question why it says everything else. So now the Gemara says, but maybe Eddie only has to pay kefil if he swore. In other words, he stole the Electrolux, and then he swore he didn't steal it, and witnesses come and said he stole it. Maybe he only has to pay kefil when it's accompanied by a shvua. Asks the Gemara, Ve'ein maganav atzmai b'shvua. So the Gemara says no, because without a shvua we would learn it out from a Kal V'Chomer. Lo yisal g'daitach, the Tanya, Reb Yaakov Oimer Shnayim Yishalem, that Eddie has to pay double, shaloi b'shvua, even if he didn't accompany it with a false oath. Ata im shaloi b'shvua, you say it's without a shvua, or yein ela b'shvua, maybe it's only with a shvua. Amr lo kachoya, it's not so. Says, well, what do you mean it's not so? My lo kachoya, what do you mean? Amr Abaye says, lo lichtay rachman shnayim yishalm beganav. It shouldn't tell us that Eddie has to pay kefil. V'leisi b'kal v'chaymer b'tointan is kind of, and we're learning how to kal v'chaymer from Mark. Remember, I gave Mark my becher, and he claims it was stolen, and then we found it by him. Right? So he has to pay kefil. So, umatointan is ganav. Madach Mark, where he got my becher beheter. I gave it to him as a deposit. Yet Amar Kra Lishalem, he has to pay double Lishalem tray. Ganav Atzmai, then Eddie, who stole my Electrolux, Surah also the other, it came to him in a forbidden way, like Holstein. But Mark, when he's tying Tanis Ganav, only pays kefil when he swears. There it's coming to tell you, you're right, we could learn out, Mark, that Eddie has to pay kefil if he swore. But the Shnayim Yishalem is telling us that he pays even if he didn't swear. Says the Gemara, but wait a second. You're saying that im himatzei timatzei is extra? Either to tell us the din of a ganev as a two klolim that we separate, or to tell us that Moedim Knas V'Achach Ba'edim is potter because im himatzei ba'edim timatzei b'dayanim. But we learn out another drasha from himatzei timatzei. V'ayim himatzei lahachi udasa. Is that coming for this? Listen to this case, because Eddie's a master at this. It says Yodai, if we find the horse in Eddie's hand, but let's say the horse came on Eddie's roof and he locked the roof and he closed the gate, and that's how he stole it. So and how do we know if it wandered into his rooftop, his courtyard, his enclosure, and he locks it? How do we know that he pays kefil then also? If it's found by him in kol makom in any fashion. So you see, we use it for this drasha and not to tell me two klolim for Geneva, or to tell me that Moedim Knas V'Achach Ba'edim is potter. So the Gemara says there's another drasha over here, because it changes. It either should have said im himatzei himatzei or im timatzei timatzei. Why does it change? Im kein lema kra oy himatzei himatzei oy timatzei timatzei. Midishani kra from himatzei timatzei. Shma min hatata. We also learn this extra drasha. Okay, we're just going to pause a moment over here to change the channel.